On this episode of the Camp Owners Podcast, Howie and I kind of do a follow-up episode to a session that was done at Tri-State, a panel of Gen Z and what they want us to know as camp owners. So we have our guest is Adam Baranker, and he does a great job in talking with us about what do we need to know about Gen Z? What are those pitfalls and how can we adapt to really match the strength and the passion and what this generation needs from us right now and this summer? So we hope that you love this episode. We loved it. It was hard to stop talking. Such an interesting conversation and what we think is so helpful for right now with recruitment, staff training, and your summer. So take a listen. We hope you love it. Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast, a space for camp owners to talk about the unique aspects of camp ownership and get inspired by each other. We are going to sit down with camp industry experts, leaders, and fellow camp owners to hear how the camp dream transpired for them, learn from each other, and discuss some of the biggest issues in the private camp industry. Welcome, everyone. My name is Kelly Shuna. I am the executive director and co-owner of Hidden Pines Ranch Day Camp, located in Stillwater, Minnesota.
Hi, everyone. I'm Howie Grossinger, and I'm the co-owner director of Camp Robin Hood, a day camp in the suburbs of Toronto, and a co-owner of Camp Walden, a overnight camp in Northern Ontario. If you are looking to find and subscribe to the Camp Owners Podcast, you can either find us online at gocamp.pro/ownerspod or by searching for us in your favorite podcast app. Finally, if you're listening to this and think it would be useful to other camp owners or aspiring camp owners in your circle, please feel free to send them a note to listen to our show.
All right, before we get down to the nitty gritty of our show, we have to be taking care of business. Can you tell I'm kind of like in a snappy, staffing, crazy mood right now, Howie?
I love it. This is the energy. It's great.
This is the energy I'm bringing today.
Don't ask me to sing, but that's good.
Wow.
You lead, I'll back. I'll play the triangle.
I probably shouldn't, but we're authentic selves here. But anyway, taking care of business, thanking our sponsors. Our first sponsor that we are going to thank today is Camp Brain. We want to give a big shout out to them for supporting our podcast. They have been in the camp industry since 1994, supporting camps across this great North American continent of ours. They have 45 plus dedicated staff to meet your every need. They can provide a comprehensive and flexible registration system that can handle all of your day, overnight, family, holiday, and one-off camping events. If you are looking to improve your system, or maybe you are thinking about growing your business and getting into retreats or family camps, they would be a great person to call. You can find them at campbrain.com or call 866-485-8885.
Amazing. We have a great topic today, Kelly. I'm super excited. Kids these days, right? Like, this is where we're going. As we all navigate staffing this summer, understanding our workforce has never, ever been more important. The impact of the pandemic on Gen Z, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, has resulted in the need to better connect, support, and adapt to the needs of this incredibly important age group. We are so excited to have Adam Baranker, the Assistant Director of Jeff Lake Day Camp in Sussex County, New Jersey, to talk about this important topic and to share his insight. Adam, welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast.
Hi, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, we're really excited to get into this topic for sure. So much to unpack, and I know the work that you're doing, I think, will give all of our listeners some really good insight and some things to think about. As it is the tradition of the Camp Owners Podcast, Adam, we ask each of our guests to tell us their camp origin story, how it began for you, how it has progressed, what has been your journey. And I think that would be a great starting point so we can all sort of learn more about, sort of the perspective and experiences you've had in our industry. So we look forward to you sharing. So how did it all start for you?
Yeah, so, fun fact about me is this is going to be my 31st summer at Jeff Lake Camp, and I'm 34 years old. So I will let you guys do the math on that one. So I started in 1992. I was 4 years old, entering kindergarten after camp. My mom was a camper and counselor at Jeff Lake in the 60s and 70s. So it was, she was really excited when she was able to send my sister and I. I will be super transparent as we start this podcast. I was a very homesick kid. I was the kid that would fake a tummy ache at the friend's sleepover down the block to get picked up by my parents. And when I went, with my sister looking at sleepaway camps, I really just could not wrap my head around it. My sister went to sleepaway camp for 7 years and loved it. But I never really tried. But I think a cool kind of part of my Jeff Lake story is that Jeff Lake is really a place that you can stay your whole life. We have a robust teen program. We have like the big kind of sleepaway camp style lake. So for me, I knew I could kind of grow there. And I always say, everything happens for a reason. I wouldn't be who I am today as one of the assistant directors, I don't think, if I had maybe left and come back, So I think that this has been a really cool journey for me, and I love my camp experience.
I think, Kelly, more and more we are meeting and talking to camp lifers in the most literal words and description, for sure. Adam and I spoke before we got on the air, and I remember just feeling that we were kindred spirits, and the fact that he was homesick as a young kid now resonates with me. I never went to overnight camp myself. First night I slept at overnight camp was the first night after I bought my own overnight camp. I think it's because my wife was near me, and that was comforting for me, to be honest. But that's another story. But I totally can relate to that journey for sure, Adam. And I think it probably, in some way, shape, or form, probably reflects the kind of connections you make with all staff in your career. Is that just you have that very personal experience too?
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And I appreciate that too, because I think that sensitivity and the fact that you can still be a lifelong day camper, and that's okay. And we have to embrace that as well. As much as people, encourage the overnight experience, we know it's not for everybody. So that could be another show altogether. Let's make a note. And we could talk about that for sure. But Kelly, we've got lots to talk to Adam about. So I thought, in terms of where do you want to start this conversation about Gen Z? And I'm the Canadian, and I'm using Gen Z. So there we go.
Where do I not want to start? So I love that you pursued Adam. It's kind of like headhunting from the conferences a little bit, isn't it? Like, ooh, I want to dive deeper into this. Totally. So Howie, I love that you sent me the Vimeo recording of his tri-state panel. I took a whole page of notes. I'm a note taker, learner. And even after listening to it, there's still a lot that I want to follow up on. And I have some comments about the questions from the audience. I did feel a little like, not that they were bad questions. I'm just more want to say, like, it's just funny, the generational things. Like, you could tell the people in the audience were of a different generation by the things that they were asking. So I think this will be very, very insightful for everyone. But I think what's important first is to start off defining Gen Z, and then the group they typically represent in our camps in regard to campers or staff, etc. So do you want to answer that question for us, Adam?
Sure. Yeah. So, as it stands today, and you could Google so many different combinations, but I think the most consistent is right now in 2022, Gen Z is as young as 9 years old and as old as 24 years old. So I know for me at Jeff Lake, it is almost getting close to my entire population at this point. I think to talk about Gen Z is to really look at just the environmental factors of their generation, right? They are now a super woke generation because of the political landscape that they've been growing up in, and how much they can get that information through social media. When I was in middle school, I wasn't following what the president was doing every day, and now it's so easy to. So I think that's a huge part of it, right? So kind of like the social justice, current event aspect of their lives. And also, they will forever be the children of the pandemic, right? So to look at Gen Z and not look at the COVID-19 pandemic and how that affected their lives is, you can't do one or the other. You really have to look at both at the same time. And I think what's kind of cool about it, and what as part of the work I love doing, is I think that they are going to take over the world. And I think that's not always the typical, feelings from the generations above. I think that they are more accepting than ever. I think they're more in tune to what's going on in the world than ever. I think they're more unique than ever. So they're not just trying to fit into boxes that, you know, other people are fitting into. But I think at the end of the day, right, at our camps at least, they still fill most of our preteen, teen, early 20s demographics. So I think, like, you know, Kelly, kind of like how you were saying, you could see the generation gaps even in a room. That's, I think, what we struggle with sometimes, is that they're not teens, right? Teens is a generic term. I was a teen at one point and I'm a millennial. A Gen Xer was a teen at some point. So to really look at them as Gen Z and not teens will make us, I think, better camp directors, you know, summer after summer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just, there was so many things that struck me during that panel, and just the idea of, if we, one of my takeaways, if we're trying to be too Gen Z, they're like cringy. Like me doing a TikTok, I can sure try, but it's going to be a little cringy. But then if we're not meeting them closer to where they are, then we're also going to get the responses of like, why aren't they responding to my email to set up an interview when, you know, like I think someone was saying like, if I tell them I'm available for this time and this time, well, maybe a Calendly link, right? Where they can just click automatically and sign up for an interview with you. So it just, for me, it was interesting of like, don't try to be Gen Z, but acknowledge who we are and try to meet us at least partway with some of those technology and understanding where we're at, how much we're getting. I don't know how, if you heard that, but they were saying like, don't email or text me, call me, because I'm getting so much information and so many emails to call me. I was like, oh, okay. I thought I was calling you just because I was a little old school, but if that's working, great.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting how we, as the older people in this relationship, have made certain assumptions that just typically don't turn out to be accurate in terms of what they need and actually what they appreciate most in terms of, you know, Gen Z. I also, Adam, to your point, I wholeheartedly agree about the description of Gen Z as accepting. You know, I think this whole generation, whether it becomes, you know, LGBTQ2S plus, or it becomes just all issues related to social consciousness and things of that kind, I often feel like, when I know in my own personal experience, when I raise these issues with my staff, like it's like yeah, it's like nothing. It's just, it is just the way we just thrive and deal with things today. So I just find all these topics are much more accessible, and we sometimes think they're harder to talk about than they actually are, because, you know, this generation is living it every day and being very accepting. So I appreciate that, and maybe there'll be a moment to even just touch on that as well. But I totally agree. You know, hey, Camp Robin Hood's doing TikTok marketing, like, you know, like and that wasn't my idea, you know, and it's been fun to explore all of that. So pretty cool. Adam, I know you probably have a few thoughts on this so far.
Yeah, you know, I think I'm also a realist, right? Are there still Gen Zers out there that are probably having feelings about others that are not so nice and not so kind, because that is where their brain is and a true scientific development standpoint, right? But I even think back to my high school years, and I'm a millennial, although I joke with my teens all the time that I think I'm the most Gen Z millennial out there. I grew up during the wrong time. I feel like I relate to them so much more than I relate to my peers. But when I was in school, the LGBTQ2S plus community, they were not, you know, outwardly able to speak about it. And I even feel like when I was in high school, you didn't like wear your religion on your sleeve. And now people talk about their Judaism or their Catholicism as part of their identity and their personal brand, or, you know, they represent, you know, the music that they listen to or the sport that they play in a different way. And I think that all of those little boxes that they're able to individually fit in is so much better than when I was that age and I was fitting into a bigger box that I was kind of put into, that I felt like, all right, I'm part of this crew of high school. You know, this is the box that I fit into. When I have, you know, I'm also a youth engagement coordinator at a synagogue during the year. And when I have my teens come in, we are a program of 130 teens. And I don't mean this as an exaggeration. There are 130 individual teens that walk through my program every week. They are all different. Sure, some of them play the same sport, but because their lives are so self-curated, right? That's like the curation of life is such a Gen Z invention,
Absolutely.
right? Because you can curate your social media feed, you can curate, what, music you're listening to on Spotify. So they're self-curating their personal brand also, and they take pride in it. I think I was nervous to self-curate when I was a millennial teen because I grew up in a world where you fit into a bigger box. So I bow down to them now that they have found this, individuality that is really great and a strong pro part of their generation.
Right. But I would imagine, and I think to your point, is that issues of cliquiness and like all these things, they still exist. Like
Oh yeah,
people
and they're
still
not going
behave.
away. Yeah.
That ain't going away. So when we think about Gen Z at staff training, and the returning staff and the new staff, they're all Gen Z, but we still see all of that stuff. We still have to navigate those important features of building community and be very intentional about it. As much as I love your description of self-curating, as much as they're in charge of their own brand, we some things cross generations in terms of behavior and interactions that we still have to continue to be mindful of, for sure. But I do really appreciate that. Kelly, any thoughts?
Oh, always so many, Howie. But no, what I was thinking about when Adam said curate and how that relates to us as camp owners and to Adam as well with staff training was taking that idea of curating the counselor experience with them for them, right? So like, I don't know if I've ever said to my staff, but I think I sure am this summer, is like, let's talk about curating this experience for you this summer. What do you want? How do you want to grow this summer? We asked them in the interview, right? And we do goals and those kind of things, but really specifically, like if Adam was one of my staff members, like, Adam, how can I curate this summer for you? What do you want me to help you work on? Like, what do you want to grow? What skills? So really curating that experience for them to help them get out of our camp what they want to get out of, not just what we say everybody's going to get out of being a counselor, but like specifically what do you want to, how do you want to grow? I really like that. And that resonated, especially after that panel when you had said, Adam, of course, look at me in my little referring to my notes here. But like when you want someone at camp to you're giving them feedback, like changing a behavior, or do something different. And your focus, like you said, is very like for camp. But to say to them, like, if you do this, you will grow in this way, or you will gain this skill, or going through this tough conversation, here's what will happen for you from that. So you're getting the needs met of camp and that person. But I'm going to roll with that curate for my staff this summer in training. I really like that a lot.
Yeah, and I think, listen, all things have positives and negatives, right? So I do think one negative of this self-curation, and one of my teams actually said it during the panel, is Gen Z as a whole, I think, is an extremely egotistical generation. And I don't even mean that word to carry that much negative weight, but they're so about themselves. And there's great entrepreneurial reasons for that and stuff like that, and social justice and all that good stuff. But because of that, and this might sound like a little jarring to some of the camp directors listening, but I don't know that they care about your brand of your camp. In my head, my dream would be that like all my counselors want to come to Jeff Lake this summer to make Jeff Lake Camp the best place it can be. That is just not the case. They're coming for their own personal experience. So to give feedback and to talk to a counselor and talk about the transferable life skills that they can get out of this job is so much more important than just, checking off my to-do list. Like I need A counselor to do B thing so C parent doesn't call, right? That's my own camp director checklist. What I should really be doing is I need A counselor to do B task so C parent doesn't call, and so D, they realize what this means for them and the mentoring that I'm doing for them and the life skills they can gain from it. So I kind of play into that ego a little bit, which like might feel like pandering, but they don't have to know, like it's that we can trick Gen Z a little bit every once in a while.
Sure. Well, yeah. And it's the art of being an effective parent. It's the art of being an effective camp director. We do those things, but I think that's a really good segue to maybe explore the issue of the pitfalls, because I think one of the things that, in terms of this bit of a narcissistic, egotistical kind of mindset that this generation might display, is, so how do you hit them through the recruitment process? How do you hit them in the engagement of the importance of staff training and the importance of various elements of your summer. So I'm wondering, Adam, given the experience with the panel and obviously the experience of hearing the questions from the audience and just your general experience, maybe we could talk a little bit about pitfalls, but also in terms of those recruitment, engagement kind of bigger topics, maybe just let's get into a phase of this conversation where we can address some of that.
Yeah, totally. And, I think addressing those things, for better or worse, only makes us stronger at our jobs. And I think, I talked about at the end of one of my other sessions at the Tri-State Camp Conference this year, I talked about that one of my least favorite things to hear camp directors say is, this is going to create more work for me. That sends chills down my spine, because we are here to create fabulous childhood memories and staff memories and human, core memory moments. And if we just look at these pitfalls and say, all right, great, Gen Z's a mess, now this creates more work for me, you're almost assuming disconnection before you're allowing yourself to connect. And I think that, we're about to talk about the pitfalls of Gen Z, but I actually think that's a pitfall of us as camp directors, is that we get stuck in that rut of that it's creating more work. But I think, one transition right from kind of talking about that self-curated kind of ego mindset is I've completely changed my staff interview process. I used to really sell the job during the staff interview process, and now I'm really selling the experience. And I tell them that they'll learn about the job at orientation. And I always say the same thing on every staff interview, and it gets a good laugh out of them. But I say, if you are logging off of this staff interview and you feel like you have no idea what your job at camp is yet, then I did my job, because that is what you're going to learn at orientation. Yeah. So don't be like, hey, mom, dad, I got this job, but I have no idea what it is. And that is super intentional, because I am hardcore selling the experience. Here is what you, the individual staff member, will get out of the experience. Sure. Do I tell them if they're going to be working with a camp group, how many kids are in the group and the flow of the day? Sure. I'm not, I'm exaggerating a little, but I think that for me, I'm selling experience. I say on every interview that's camp is as good for the staff as it is for the kids. And I want them to know that. And I think that is how they'll join us this summer.
Yeah, and I agree. I think in terms of, and I do hire all the staff here at Robin Hood, and I feel like I've even seen a real change in my approach, and some of it has been pandemic induced now that I'm in Zoom mode, but also really trying to empathize and identify or acknowledge that it's been tough for campers, and kids deserve camp, but you deserve camp. You as a young person deserve camp. And I have found my language evolving around that as well. And I have found as well I'm sure there are other people out there doing the same, but I talk about, Adam, this is great that you say it as well. It makes me feel really good, is that it's transformational, right? That this experience will be as powerful for you as it will be for what you give to somebody else. And I think that really resonates with, and when you're on Zoom and I do group information sessions, you can see it. Sometimes it lights up in them. They smile. They'll do the obligatory laughing at Howie's dad jokes, the usual stuff. But I feel that's been a good way of connecting. But yeah, I love the line about all that stuff you'll learn at orientation. You don't worry about that. I think that's great.
Yeah. I'm almost saying to them, I don't have time for that right now. It's I don't tell them that, but it's orientation is when you get your hands dirty a little bit. This is a conversation. This is almost like a character reference, right? I am here to get to know you. We're just out to lunch. I want to see what your vibe is all about. A big thing too is I'm all about getting the elephant out of the room. So I talk about the pandemic with them within the first 5 minutes of the interview. And I've been asking them to tell me their COVID-19 story. So what the 2 years has looked like for them. Have you been virtual? Have you been hybrid? Did you lose your senior prom? And how might that affect your job this summer? Because I think the other thing talking about the wokeness of Gen Z is I think they're super in tune to how adults are communicating with them, and they find authenticity and, you know, inauthentic people, I think, very well. So I think that if I were just like to graze over this like national global health crisis, or, you know, that we've had, like, I think Gen Z might look at us and be like, this guy's just gonna hire me, but not like reference that like this is my first job after, right?
Yeah, where have you been?
Exactly.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I find also, you know, we're in such a mode, pardon me, of self-care and mental health awareness and self-awareness individually, that I've often now intentionally included how we're going to take care of you at camp, right? That, you know, you may just think that we think our priority is taking care of the kids, but I talk about the mental health and the support, and I think that that's stuff that this generation is looking for, because I think more than ever, at least through my experience, is there is an eagerness to share how they're feeling, to the extent that it's in our best interest to say that we're a place that wants to hear that.
Oh yeah.
And I think, and I feel that that may not have been the case over many years of hiring and supporting staff. In some instances, I think it's more important than ever, because they're assessing us like, are you the right people for me?
Yep.
Yeah.
I also think that, you know, a lot of boundaries were broken during the pandemic. I always joke. So my youth group was virtual for 2 years. We were on Zoom. The attendance was still great. We met weekly. And I always joke that if you would have told me pre-pandemic that I would have been Zooming with one of my high school kids while they were laying in their bed, I would have been like, that is a boundary I am not going to break. But here they are. They're laying in bed. I know what every one of my high school kids' bedrooms look like. And there's like this weird thing now that like, yes, I'm this adult that's in charge of them. I still am like a, you know, a qualified reporter if I feel like something's off with one of my teens. I have some mental health training and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I feel like they don't know what box to put me in as their mentor and their leader and their camp director, because at one point I'm in their bedroom, right? We're doing a game night on Zoom. And then the next day I'm in front of them trying to give them an actual serious direction. So I think for me, especially during the interview, I want to show both sides of that personality of my own as a camp director, that yes, I am your employer. There are boundaries that we cannot cross and I will not cross, because that makes my camp the most safe place it can be. And right now I'm interviewing you and you're sitting on your bed in your dorm room. So like, as we speak, there is a boundary that is being crossed that I think confuses Gen Z a little bit. And I've actually never asked one of my teens about that. And because of this podcast and this conversation, that's going to be a follow-up question I'm going to text one of my teens after this, because I'm curious. Like, how do they see us? We're everywhere now, you know?
Even what you wear. I find myself, before, when I was doing interviews, I was thinking about like, okay, I should put on a sweater. I should look a little, you know, more professional. I didn't even care. I mean, it's only the waist up now, but like, I don't even think as much about some of those, what I'm wearing for a Zoom interview. So I think it is interesting, those boundaries that have.
Yeah. Like Kelly and Howie, have you guys had ever done an interview virtually where someone's been eating a meal?
Yes.
No.
Yeah, like
Yes.
I had an interviewer that I was speaking to, great guy. I hired him. He was awesome. He was having his breakfast, a full bowl of cereal. And in my head, I was like, if someone ever came to an in-person interview pre-pandemic and whipped out a bowl of cereal out of their pocket, I would have been like, excuse me? But we just had an interview over cereal, you know? Like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And I just even think of I've been wearing like a camp hat in like I normally would never wear a hat, like, but I'm wearing my hat, I'm wearing my sweats, like it's very I'm glad we brought that up. But
I think the fascinating piece about this is there's actually a takeaway, right? We are confusing this generation, because I am trying to get real professional stuff out of them during the 8 weeks of camp, when maybe I've lowered my level of professionalism, not on purpose, but I am dressing more casually, I'm speaking more casually. And then all of a sudden, when it's time for me to pivot, right, that's almost like a little selfish. It's like, now I need to be professional, but I've been confusing them for the past, since their interview process started. So it's like very kind of, a fascinating dichotomy that I almost feel like we have to not get frustrated with Gen Z if they are acting a little bit more casual around their supervisors, because I think that's just where we are as a world right now.
Yeah, I so many interesting adaptations, and that was the next thing that Howie and I really wanted to connect with you on, was the adaptations that camp owners maybe need to be thinking about, or having at least on our radar. So we've talked about some of the questions that have changed in our interview. We've talked about, which also the panel brought up, is asking about mental health, asking about how COVID has impacted them. They talked about calling them on the phone versus email or text. I also liked when you brought up they're entrepreneurs. So really talking about the business of camp, like what it takes to get camp ready. And camp is fun, but it is a business. So are there any other things that stick out for you, for camp owners to know about, adapting to Gen Z or relating to them, or just things for us in the next couple months?
Yeah, I think two kind of key things come to mind. The first one is they are super in tune to what they like and what they don't like. And that might sound weird. Like you might say to yourself, if you're listening to this and you're a millennial or Gen X, you might be saying like, I know what I like and what I don't like, but it's different because how quickly they can swipe away a TikTok video or unfollow someone on Instagram that isn't benefiting their feed anymore. We're going back to that buzzword, they're so curated that they are so, for better or worse, almost a little fickle on how they get information. So for me, I've really changed like my orientation process, because I feel like I know how quickly they'll tune out or they'll not like the person speaking in front of them. And I actually stole this from one of my teams and I still use it. The idea of starting with the punchline. So I think, a TikTok is 15 seconds, it could be longer, but you're getting all the information right away. So if we're leading an orientation session, or if I'm asking an interview question and the punchline, like the mic drop moment, is 10 minutes into the conversation, I lost them at minute 2. Right. Whereas I think for a millennial like me, when I didn't have those short videos, I didn't have, I was watching the Titanic. That was a 3-hour movie. That was my entertainment. And that was a long movie. So I think that like starting with the punchline, getting right to the point and being intentional about that, I think is super important in terms of, how to kind of meet them where they are and adapt. And then part 2, which might be a little controversial because it goes back to that I think some camp directors might feel like it's adding more work for them, is so Jeff Lake was open the past 2 summers, even with the pandemic. And I really treated my staff like campers the past 2 years. I had this mantra in my head that they were campers leading campers. Especially because last year, my first year junior counselors, their last full year of school was in 8th grade. So I had 8th graders, or what I felt like 8th graders, running my groups. So I had to meet them where they are and give them that little ego boost that we were talking about, when I was showing up to one of their activities, I was making sure the counselors were having as much fun as the kids. And I don't know if I did that pre-pandemic because I thought they were there just for the job. But now I know, because of what they've been through and they were in their bedroom for 2 years and not having the same experiences, I really now see my staff as like the domino effect that if they're having maximum capacity fun, so will their kids. And I've really changed kind of how we run our program in terms of staff involvement in activities.
We used to have an abbreviation that was on our fanny packs a couple of years ago, pre-pandemic, that was FTC. So we'd always be like FTC, like for the campers. And now it's for you too. So that is super true. That is super true. And I like one of the panel, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Howie, but he had said Gen Z is really known as lazy or stubborn, but he said, I'm not lazy. I know right away, like you said, Adam, what I like and I don't like. So if it's an opportunity that I'm like, I'm not going to jump at it. So it's like that recruitment piece of, they know right away if they like it or not. So I thought that was interesting.
Well, it's also I find that I have to do even my own self-talk during some of the interview process, or even when I've taught, last year I'm thinking staff training, like what I have traditionally thought as tuning me out or the speaker out is not that at all. In fact, I've even had this with my own kids who are now all in their 20s, but over the last 5 years, we'd watch a movie and they don't have to watch the screen. They're on their phone while they're watching the movie, and they're doing so. The definition of multitasking has like taken this whole new form. And for those of us who grew up saying, no, we're watching a movie and all eyes on deck, and this is what we're like. So I think I've had to even train myself not to get too perturbed by those things, and just understand that I'm still connecting. They're probably listening to me still, and not jumping to the gun of making certain conclusions too quickly. And I think that's to your point, Adam. To some extent, I think we just, that better understanding. But I wholeheartedly think that giving some more specific thought to staff training and the length of sessions and the idea of the punchline, I think that's really awesome stuff that we need to think of, because we got to grab them and we got to get them, because they know what they like. I also find the whole phone thing, right? Like, I don't know what you do at Jeff Lake and at, HPR, Kelly, but obviously we don't want them on their phone all day, but this is their lifeline. And we're talking all the time about being patient and comfortable and appropriate with phones at work and stuff like that. But how are that's a function of Gen Z for sure.
Yeah, and I think what I don't want to make a generalization, I think what maybe some camp directors miss is the teaching the intentional piece behind why we don't want them to have their phones. Right. If you're just wagging your finger at Gen Z and saying no phones, that's our policy, they're like, they'll be like, this place, they're not going to be into it. But for me, I talk about, how we're protecting them, right? You never want a camper to think that you're maybe taking a picture of them, and that's uncomfortable and there's not consent in that. Or how, God forbid, someone gets injured in front of you and another camper says, well, they were on their phones, they didn't see me fall. Like we talk about that. We're not just telling them to not have their phones to be these like dictators running a camp. There's intention behind it. And I think what we always have to remember, and I talk about this all the time, is that they were born into a world with cell phones. I was not. Their cell phones existed, but my mom plugged it into the lighter in her car. That was her cell phone. How can we be angry at a generation that is just simply being born into a world where that thing exists? And I think when you kind of flip that mindset that, yeah, phones exist and they have them because it's what they have access to, that kind of takes the anxiety down a little bit. But I think, we do a session in orientation. It's called the social media contract. And we go through a 10-step contract of the why. And we're really telling them, like, this is our mentorship of you. That's the cell phone policy. And one thing I will say, and this is just luck, pure luck, but I have noticed that during the pandemic, they love putting their phones away. And if, you never want a global health crisis to make anything good happen, but if that means that they learned how to detach from their phones because they were so hooked up to it when they were in lockdown and on virtual school, that my counselors were thrilled last summer to keep their phones away, which was great.
Yeah, and I feel to some extent that's a huge selling feature. We talk about getting kids off the screens, and I use language, and I'm sure a lot of people do, is like, you deserve to be off screens. You need breaks, and camp provides that. Not to mention that, while the three of us are predominantly day camp centric, we're not lost on the fact that camp owners in the overnight camp world, I mean, to ask a Gen Z to put their phone away for 10 weeks at overnight camp is, we thought 7-8 years ago, yes, there's no phones and they're putting them away and they're locking them in the box when they come in, and they can only take them out on their days off and all this stuff. Like, no, like we're now re-examining this with a pure understanding of the role it plays in their lives and what's on that for them. So I think that we're all reevaluating and now need to more than ever, given what everyone has gone through over the last couple of years, for sure. Any other things in terms of adaptation? I'm wondering, through the summer, we talked a lot about recruitment, we talked a lot about orientation and staff training, but we've often, I'm wondering if this fickleness that is perceived about Gen Z, Adam, what about staff like living up to their commitments, sticking with what they started? Sometimes there is a generalization that maybe Gen Z, hey, something else comes up and, their parents don't even care if they quit, and blah, blah, blah. Any thoughts on that aspect? Because I think some of us as camp owners are saying, boy, oh boy, they said yes to us today, but they're ghosting us and they won't show up to staff training, or they start with us and they won't show up in week 4 when we really need them to fulfill their contract. I thought we'd maybe just get into some of that, some thoughts around that part of the Gen Z understanding.
Yeah, I think a big part of that is understanding the kind of adult relationship that these staff members and older campers are craving. They had no relationship with their teachers when they were virtual. My wife is a kindergarten teacher, and she would say it was impossible to form a connection with them. It was just checking the box that the class got through the hour with, no kid like falling off the bed while they're plugging in their computer or something. And I think that because of that, they are super in tune to not wanting to disappoint an adult, because I think that they're craving that mentorship relationship. So for me, and this, I hate to call it one of those tricks again, because I feel like some of my teens will listen to this and they'll be like, Adam, are you just trying to trick us all the time? But I do kind of trick them into not wanting to disappoint me. And I think that that might sound broad, but that really gets me the product that I need. If I form these connections with them, I ask them about their personal life, I take an interest, I throw an arm around them if they need it, then I have money in the bank that, week 4, when they did blank, they're like, Adam's been so awesome. I don't want to disappoint him. I don't want to hurt his feelings. He loves this place. And I think I really try to get that message through to them. I had a counselor who worked for me last summer who came from another camp and had said to me that this is the first time that I feel like I had an adult at camp that cared about me more than just being like one of 500 kids like you. And it was like a compliment to me, and it gives me the chills now just even talking about it, because if a camper says that, I feel like I'm doing, a counselor says that, I feel like I'm doing my job. But basically what he was saying is that it's really easy to get lost in the sauce of a camper counselor population. At Jeff Lake, I have 275 staff members that I'm trying to make feel good. But what I do is I put people in place so those numbers shrink, right? Like as the director of the 6th through 10th grade boys program at my camp, I'm only overseeing like 12 to 15 counselors. I can make 12 to 15 counselors feel really good about themselves and really good about their relationship. And then the counselor who has the other division, they're doing the same thing. Sorry, the group leader. But, I think that we cannot just run a camp and give our counselors a job description and make sure they check off those boxes. Because and this might sound blunt, I think they'll quit. If there's no personal connection, that, like, we're going back to that word fickle, they're just going to quit. But if you kind of hook them in with giving them a mentor, giving them a vibe that they matter, I think is super important to Gen Z.
I'm just soaking it in. So I'm just soaking it in.
Adam's speaking our language. We've been doing this for so many. This is like,
I know. I love it. I think
part of the team now. Look at that. We love that. No, it's so true. I just find, and it's interesting, Adam, all camps do hiring very differently, of course. And I know for Kelly and myself, and I can speak from my own experience, there's a tradition of 60 years of our family running camp that the director hires all the staff personally, right? Because I always say to my staff, the people are, when you come to orientation, I'm going to be really proud of the fact that I'm the only one who really knows you on that first day you show up. And we as owners and directors who can, if we're in the position, and I think it's a great position and I embrace it, doing it even for as long as I have, I know the power of that connection and remembering things about an individual staff member conversation. Adam, I'm sure this is true for you too, right?
Oh yeah.
You interviewed someone earlier today. You're probably going to hire them, hopefully. And I know that you're probably the type of person, when you see them the next time in person, you're going to remember a fun fact about them. And it's going to be like, I chose the best place to work because the boss knows who I am.
Hey, little do they know, I'm on their Instagram page during the interview.
Yeah. Well,
if
there
I
you go.
see them in a sports jersey and I like that team too,
yeah,
I'm making that connection on the interview.
And I don't want to suggest for a moment that this is a cheat or a trick of the trade or anything like this, because I think you have to bring a level of authenticity and genuineness to that relationship. Because let's be honest, just like the 4-year-olds at our camps or the first time 9-year-old at your overnight camp, they know the interested adult in their life within seconds. So they're gonna spot the BS. So I think when you can genuinely approach it in the way that you described, I think it's incredibly powerful. And at the end of the day, with so many of us nervous about them not showing up to staff training or quitting in the summer, I think this is a really healthy and very vile. It's a safeguard. This relationship building is a real safeguard against those things happening to us. And I think that's really great. I'm glad we touched on that. Kelly,
Yeah.
I know this stuff is really important to you as well.
Well, I just brought this up. So I watched the rest of the panel this morning, and then my new year-round assistant director, I was talking with her, and I was like, okay, well, what are you? She's like, I'm a zillennial. So she's 24. So she's like, I like to think of myself as a zillennial. And so she had brought up, I had said, okay, they're a very passionate, like we were just talking about some of those characteristics. Like they said they were egotistical and, kind of lazy and things, but they also are super passionate and they are so socially conscious. And like you said about the present, but she was saying some of those things, but she was also saying that they have a lot of mistrust in the institutions, right? Of like government, of big corporations, of even schools right now. Like, so you said, Adam, like there is mistrust in those institutions that are supposed to support them and lift them up. And so, like you said, Howie, what that sparked for me is a thought of I almost feel like we have an obligation to be an institution of the summer that is going to do right by them, like is going to lift them up and support them and be there for them. And like you said, Adam, like they are hungry for that mentorship. So that excites me. Like that, ignites the passion, like we're going to go to our inspiration next. But that to me makes this like just adds fuel to the fire that I think we all three have is like, man, this job is important, but that's extra important that what our staff are really hungry for is just to do right by them and to be that thing that they are missing or having mistrust to build that trust back for them.
Yeah. And I think now more than ever, we talked earlier about like the authenticity piece and how much they can see through things. If you have a director at your camp that does not interface with the staff, but then during the summer, you feel like you want to call them in like as like the principal, if there's like a staffing issue, I would cut that person out completely now. Like it is okay to have someone on your full-time team that does not work directly with the staff. Because I know for me, if I've now nurtured these relationships and my staff feel like they're in a safe space when they're working with me, and then all of a sudden I pull in director X, that's just not going to work anymore. And I don't know if it ever really worked, and maybe just Gen Z has made us look at it differently, but it's okay if you have certain people that are good at it and that are doing it, throughout the whole summer, that those are the people that are really interfacing with the staff. So then it doesn't feel like you're trying to create fake relationships.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm so glad you made that point, because we talk about camp's not school and camp isn't that institution, and I think we have a real great opportunity to break down that perception of what the boss is. What does this, we have an opportunity to really create a view for them that is healthy and beneficial and supportive. So I really love all of that. And I think that, at the end of the day, Adam, we could be talking about this for a very long time. And
I agree.
The energy in this conversation and the passion we have, I think, I know a lot of our listeners share as well. I think that talking about safe space and all this good stuff, this has always been a safe space for our second sponsor of the Camp Owners Podcast. I occasionally try to do that, Kelly. But Camptivities, our friend Ryan Rosen out in LA, has been an incredible sponsor and supporter of our show. As I've always said, I'm sure many of us have been Googling what is the best camp activity scheduler out there, and you come across Camptivities. I can't encourage you enough to check them out. As you click the link, you're already thinking, maybe this would never ever work for me. I can't do this. but you start to check it out deeper and you find out about group scheduling and camper scheduling and batch scheduling, and maybe you have individual choice and group choice. Camptivities could do it all. As a proud Camptivities user, I know their team is always available for all kinds of resourcing and support. And it all starts with a call or reaching out on their website for that initial conversation. So Kelly and I encourage you to let Camptivities help you get away from your desk and back out into camp. The team at Activities would love to show you the next big thing in camp. Visit camptivities.com and set up a time to chat.
Awesome. All right. Well, it's one of our favorite parts that we get to at the end is our inspiration. So we always end our show with something that's inspiring us right now. This can be a book, article, podcast, documentary, leadership quote, just anything that's adding that fuel to your camp director, assistant director, owner fire. I will be a good host and role model, and I will go with mine first, if that's okay. And then we'll go with Howie and then Adam. So the thing that's inspiring me right now, I actually have a copy. It could be like an infomercial, is I am doing my leadership retreat this weekend. Howie and I just talked about that, my first ever. I'm pretty pumped. But I have a book called The Enneagram and You. And so with my leadership team, we're going to do the Enneagram quiz at the beginning of this book. And then what I think is so amazing is at the end, it has a whole chapter about using the Enneagram to improve relationships at work. So we'll actually say Enneagram number 2 and 4. And so with my leadership team, we're going to match up in pairs and talk about how the two of us, according to our Enneagram numbers, our strengths in working together, and then the parts that might be hard for the two of us. And then we're going to talk as a whole team. So I'm really excited. So that has me really inspired for my retreat coming up. All right, Howie, do you want to share what you have today?
Yeah, that sounds awesome, Kelly. I can't wait to hear how that goes. For me, I'm going back into sort of the library for myself personally. It's a book. Some of you may have read it before. I thought, given the topic, I was inspired to go back into my resources. And a book that I really enjoyed reading quite a while ago was The Coaching Habit. And I think that more than ever, our staff, Gen Z or otherwise, always have benefited from a reliable coach in their life, someone they can rely on, give good feedback, timely support, etc. And I think at the end of the day, the book, The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Stanier, really addresses how, as a coach, we should be asking really good questions. And that is the heart of good coaching, is asking good questions about what's on your mind, what's a real challenge you're having right now, things of that kind. It's easy. Some people get into the coaching pitfall of just giving all the answers. We have to ask the good questions. And I thought with Gen Z or otherwise, this would be a good one. So check out The Coaching Habit if you haven't yet. Adam, for you?
Yeah, for this topic, I thought it would be kind of cool to give inspiration from a Gen Zer themselves. So a couple summers ago, I had a 14-year-old camper. I'm going to call him by name because he knows I've quoted him on this a lot. His name is Tyler. And we were playing kind of like a circle kind of board game style camp activity. And he kind of poked fun at someone. And I was like, all right, don't make fun of it. It's all good. And he said, which was one of the biggest mic drop quotes I've ever heard a 14-year-old say. He said, "I'm not making fun of it. I'm just having fun with it." And I think with cancel culture and how nervous people are to laugh at one another or poke fun or just say the wrong thing, the idea of not making fun of it and just having fun with it is something that I think we should lean into as camp directors this summer. And if you can find ways for your staff and your campers to, what I call, use positive laughter, whether it's in a team building game or an icebreaker or a conversation where you're allowing people to feel so comfortable around each other that they can get into that space, I think is really important. And we shouldn't always be right away telling people, shooting down, little laughing moments and stuff like that. And I think that's something that's really important.
That's awesome.
Ouch. Ouch. That strikes deep as a parent. I'm going to tell you that right now. I'm always like, are you laughing at them or with them? oh, Adam, why you gotta get so raw with me as a mom? Okay. All right. I'm gonna think about that.
That's awesome. Adam, we're coming to the end of the show, and we definitely can't thank you enough. This has been incredibly insightful, an important topic, so nice to, I mean, this is the best part of doing this is just meeting great people, and so glad we've connected. If people want to get a hold of you, if there was a, if shoot you a line, ask you a question based on this conversation, what's the best way to get a hold of Adam Baranker?
Yeah, you can, definitely shoot me an email at adam@jefflakecamp.com. But like I joked earlier, how I sometimes feel like I'm a Gen Zer at heart. Follow me on social media. Hit me up on Instagram at Adam Baranker. I really curate a lot of my camp life through my Instagram stories and my DMs. So yeah, find me on Instagram. And I'll make a joke. Don't find me on Facebook because that's going out of style already, right?
Yes, I get reminded of that all the time. Kelly, how about you? How do we get a hold of you?
My email is kelly@hiddenpinesranch.com. I've never shared my Instagram on here, Howie, but that makes me think like I do share some funny stories about owning a camp. I think I'm like KJ Shuna 3. I don't know. Look at me all hip announcing my Instagram on here. Not my Facebook though, because I'm not going to age myself, Howie.
Okay, let's not do that. Well, you know what? I'm just going to start with at Howie Grossinger on Instagram. Let's just go with that right away. But I still do check my inbox on a regular basis on my email. So you can reach me at howie@camprobinhood.ca. Would love to connect with our friends out in the camp world. So please reach out. Don't forget that you can find all of our show notes at gocamp.pro/ownerspod. You can find the resources that we mentioned in this show and lots of good stuff there. You can find lots of good stuff there, not only from our show, but from other amazing Go Camp Pro podcasts. We really hope you enjoyed this and this was beneficial. Adam, thanks so much. Kelly, great to see you. And we look forward to everyone joining us again on the Camp Owners Podcast. Take care.